dry farming has been around for a long time. They used to just call it farming. And it really has evolved from a particular climate that is not all over the world, but in California, in parts of Europe, Asia, the Middle East. It's wet winters and dry summers. The start of agriculture really is people realizing that they could conserve moisture in the soil by disturbing it, and that would hold the moisture in where they could utilize it during the warm time of the year when they could grow fruits, vegetables, grains. It's evolved from just a sharp stick in the ground to plows pulled by animals, to disc plows, gang plows that are used behind tractors, discs, spaders. They all do the same thing. They'll break that bond. And I guess I have to do a little illustration for you guys. There's the soil level right there. Grass plant. When we dry farm, the reason that we dry farm is that moisture is it follows capillary action, and that's what brings moisture up into the top of the plant to feed the leaves. It starts way down here, as deep as the roots go, as fine as the roots go, all the way down to root hairs. The moisture grabs a hold of that root, and then it's drawn up the plant, molecule by molecule, all the way up to where it finally transpires through the leaves and goes into the atmosphere. In the modern farming, which we see really has become dominant, this process is kind of ignored. The water is all available to the plants, whether they're grapes or anything else, is available through drip systems or sprinklers or something like that. They're not too concerned with that chain of moisture from the subsoil to the atmosphere. In dry farming, we are concerned with that. We want to break that chain. And that's why we take 4 to 6 inches of dirt and turn it upside down. Molecularly, the chain is broken. There is no longer that connection of the little grass stems coming up into the atmosphere. Even out in the ground right here, in the wasteland, after the plants are dead even, they don't have to be alive to draw moisture up, and you can prove that to yourself by putting a stick in a bucket of water. The stick will draw moisture right up the stick. It's the same capillary action that's happening. The mowed vineyard, even though the tops are mowed off, you still have the stem and the root system, and it's still sucking moisture out of the ground, particularly when we get 100-degree days, and it could be 115-degree soil temperatures. It's just boiling out of the ground. I have been farming vineyard and planting vineyard like this. I started in about 1970. I got out of the service and looked for a job, found one on a prune and bear ranch that was converting to grapes, owned by a stockbroker, and in Dry Creek, and just kind of learned by the seat of my pants. I was fortunate in that next door to me, there was this rasty old Italian guy who needed help. And I wasn't terribly busy on this ranch. It was kind of disorganized. So I would go over and help this old guy, Jim Gadani, on his vineyard. He was an old sharecropper, and he had vineyard and prunes. On the one hand, we were planting modern vineyards with end posts and wire and drip system and spraying it with Saigon and Treflan and all this other nasty stuff. And then in the evening or in the afternoon or on Saturday, I'd go over and see what Jim was up to, and he'd go, "You don't need any of that stuff. Just get out there, work the ground, and they'll be fine." And so I was getting back and forth. As time went on, I realized, and as time went on, I got married. I needed to. I actually got fired from the job for being a wise ass or whatever. But and I needed a place to live. I was lucky. I found the place to live. Bought a house over on Canyon Road, and decided to follow that path of sharecropping. It looked viable to me. I couldn't afford vineyard land, but this was in 1976, I guess I had gotten known by a bunch of old Italians who were getting too old to do it themselves, or their families had these old vineyards that Grandpa had planted, and they couldn't see the expense of tearing it out, putting in new. And even though the production was down and the soil was poor, they thought, well, let Paul farm it, then we don't have to think about it and we'll get something out of it. And so I would farm these places on different percentages depending on the yields, but most of the yields were poor, so the percentages I could get 75% usually on a vineyard. As I stuck with these vineyards and scratching my head trying to figure out what to do, I was paying attention to the whole organic movement, and I thought, well, I found out about cover crops, and I thought, I'm gonna buy a cover crop drill. So I bought one of the first Smizer cover crop drills from Lamson over here in Geyserville at the time, and merrily went around planting cover crops, mostly that vetch, cowpea, oat or barley mix that they sell at LaBallister's. I still use that. And I'd plant the cover crops and thinking, now this is going to happen. Nitrogen is going to be fixed. The yields will come up. The soil will heal. And these cover crops would get up maybe 6 inches tall, Well, what is that going to do for the vineyard? And they'd be in the springtime, they'd be just this crummy little stuff. And I'm thinking, that's not doing it. Well, the soil was gone. These old vines, low yields, sometimes you could see the foot of the vine coming out of the ground. It meant that almost a foot of soil had been left. It's all hillside vineyard. But sometimes a foot had been plowed away. But there's the vine still sitting there. My wife has always been a big vegetable gardener. And so I have to feed her habit of soil building and for food production. So I'm doing my own. I would get grape pumice and spoiled hay and whatever, thrash it together, try to make compost out of it. And at one point, early on, I had an old batch of Napa Gamay, and I'm hauling grape pumice into the place in the fall after the wineries have processed it. I'm taking it out of a pile and hauling it home with an old truck I had and dumping it in piles through the avenue to spread later on during the winter time, so that I can build up the soil a little bit. And I dumped one pile almost on top of a grapevine. It kind of covered half of the grapevine as it slopped off the back of the truck. I didn't think anything of it until that next spring, when I'm going to work the ground. I dig that away from the pile. I'm putting it in a wheelbarrow, hauling it out, putting a wheelbarrow between each 4 vines through the vineyard. And as I dig closer and closer to this one vine that's buried, I'm coming across adventitious roots from the vine. Now this is an old nasty Napa Gamay that was 30 or 40 years old, had bark that thick, and it had like hair coming out all the way around it, wherever that grape pumice was. And I go, oh, that vine is telling me something. It's saying it really likes that stuff, you know, that it wants it. And it really got me thinking. I was thinking the grape pumice is just, it's something cheap, it's available, it's right there. But now then I started thinking, it's in reality exactly what grapevines are looking for. If you think of the fact that the grapevine scouts its way through the ground, finding nutrients and minerals to express as leaves and canes and wood, it does that, and then it sets fruit, and it invests a lot in its fruit because that's its future. We cut that fruit off, we squeeze some water and sugar out of that pile and then throw the rest of it away. And what I realized is that grapevine likes what we threw away. It's exactly what it needs to make more fruit and to make more grapevine stronger. So slowly I've kind of evolved the process of thinking that the soil is really where, with these old vineyards, if I'm going to really make a living out of it and get better yields, I've got to build up the soil, both with nutrients and with sponge. And the sponge, as John was saying, that's the water holding capacity. The cover crops, I think, give you that. And after I started putting out pumice compost and cover cropping, I was getting cover crops that'll stand this tall, that slow the tractor down when you're trying to chop it up. I mean, I'm down this vineyard as a good example. I've got some good tractors, and that's the hardest job they do, is chopping the cover crop. I would think, it'd be disking or something, but they don't mind the disking. But they strains their milk to chop the cover crop. In this vineyard, we'll get a 4 and 5 foot cover crop by the time it's over. And my inclination is actually to hold off. I kind of call it the great growth period of the cover crop, and it's February and March. It warms up, and the cover crop will double in size in only a matter of a few weeks. We always get it not quite right. It's always a little dry. It never rots completely. It's always a pain in the neck to drag around, and it plugs up the cultivator and things like that. But the flip side of that is it's there for the next winter rains to protect the soil, to make a matrix that absorbs the winter rains, and also a seedbed of the wild wild seeds that are not our cover crop seed, but there'll be wild oats and brome and mustard, wild radish. And they're just there, boom, they're right up as soon as we get some water. They're off to town. This vineyard is, when Dave Runson asked if I do a talk on this, I thought, you know, Cyberry Vineyard is a good example because it's one I planted. It's a pioneered vineyard. It really has had very little water. We did water. We did the grafting ourselves, and we watered. We planted in February. We watered in July. When the wood got ripe to graft with, we grafted in August. And then we watered once or twice since then, I think. Back when they were 2 or 3 years old, we had some dry years. We were concerned about losing a crop. So I think I used a just length of drip pipe and flipped it over the rows and watered that way because we don't have a whole lot of water on this ranch. But other than that, that's been the water. These vines are doing their thing. Like weaning somebody off of alcohol. Don't, do it kind of, or drugs might be better, is do it gently. Don't, if you just do cold turkey, you'll pay for it. The vines are tough, so they'll be okay. But what you don't want to do is continue farming if you're doing tilling every other row or not tilling at all. That's really your conversion. The vines don't care. They want moisture. If you give them moisture in the soil, they'll use it. If they've been dripped, I've dug out a bunch of vineyards, so I've seen the way a drip system will really train a vine. Wherever the dripper is, that's where the roots are. And if they're doing a grass-centered, the roots don't even go out there. They don't even know that ground is there. It could be the richest ground in the world, but because there's no moisture, because the grass has dried that moisture out, they're not there. They're hanging around that dripper just like an alcoholic is at 6 in the morning, waiting for the bar to open up. In the way that we grow grapes these days, that zone that a vine that's on a drip system is a very sensitive zone because water, nutrients are there today and gone tomorrow. And yes, there's a virus in the vine that's expressing itself as red blotch, but I suspect nutrients are also a factor in that. They're bringing it out. And because a lot of people will look at a vineyard and they'll go, oh my God, it's starting to look terrible, And they go down and turn the water on because that's what vineyards need. And it's actually exactly what they don't need. That zone where those roots are is being leached of nutrients by the water. And the poor vine is looking for nutrients. You're giving it water, but there's nothing in it. And then every once in a while, if you fertigate, so yes, it's there, they're happy again. But it's here today, gone tomorrow. It makes for a vine that's a lot more temperamental. It's on a much narrower band of viability, Whereas these guys, they know where they are, they know what's down there, they're happy. When you're a dripped vine, you're always kind of balancing on this narrow beam.